The key theme really is Jesus present and being present in us and how we are in the ministry of aged care. And there's two parts of the story that I want to share today. The first part is about journey, and the second part is the importance of telling the story. And I'd like to really lead into this living the mission in aged care, in Catholic aged care, by using a story from the Gospel. The story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus. They were on the road and they were bereft. Something terrible had happened. They'd lost their friend, he'd been crucified, there was a great drama, and they couldn't understand what had happened, and they were really in a very lost place. So they were walking along the road, and suddenly there was a stranger that joined them. And the stranger said to them, "What's happening?" And they said to this stranger, "We can't understand why you don't know what's happened. All the things that have happened these last few days, and Jesus was crucified and he's now gone, and we're just in a terrible state." Anyway, they walked along, and it seemed that they connected in the dialogue along the road. This stranger who walked with them was really interested, and he kept asking them, "Tell me how it is for you." So the disciples shared their story. They shared the things that were great about being with their friend Jesus, and how Jesus had become the centre of their lives. And then they shared the story of how they just couldn't understand how they were now in this place, despite the fact that Jesus had told them what was going to happen. Now they were on this road, and it was just a very sad place to be. So they continued on the journey together, talking with this stranger who was actually very interested in what they had to say. And they came to a place where they sat down and they stayed together and they shared a meal. And the presence of their friend, who was no longer a stranger, really connected with them. He had become their friend, and something happened. Something happened in them. Their hearts were just burning in this new relationship that had come along the road, and suddenly he was gone. So this story has so much to tell us about the mission of aged care and the three key areas of living that mission. Firstly, it's about presence and how we are present. Secondly, it's about the journey, walking the journey. And thirdly, it's about telling the story. Presence, it's such an important aspect of who we are as we walk the journey with the people that we're serving in aged care. Our disposition of kindness and compassion, wanting to be there, listening, and creating a space where people can just be themselves. Presence comes through in so many different ways in an organisation. It's about the relationships being at the heart of who we are and what we do, and it's relationships at all levels. The client is at the central place of our mission, and that relationship is the key relationship. At the same time, presence is really an important aspect of every relationship in the organisation, right from the relationship with the client all the way through to all the other relationships, the relationships with their families, with staff, with board directors, with owners, with volunteers and government. So it's very central. It really creates the culture in our mission of aged care. So our second theme, journey. Remember that Jesus met the disciples on the road right where they were. And so for us in the mission of aged care, that's the invitation for us to meet those that we're caring for right where they are, not when they get it all together. And the same with staff and families. It's very challenging often to meet families where they are because it's a very difficult time for families. They're often grieving because of their decision to have their loved one cared for in an aged care facility or even in community care. And then there'll be key milestones along the journey. There may be some sudden things that are quite unexpected. A person goes to hospital or they have a fall. The families are finding things very difficult. So it's like Jesus on the Emmaus journey. Our presence with them is to be with them where they are. And it's always very challenging for us as the carers or the administrators to actually be able to bring forth from ourselves the resources that are required to be in very challenging environments often. And then of course there's the dying of the person. And along that journey where the disciples were bereft, there was that remembering in them that Jesus said something about this new life. So for us, that's a theme always under the surface in the journey of aged care, because we know that the person is going to leave us in a physical death. At the same time, we're really invited into the daily life of the person, and each day is precious to live in that, and the dying is the letting go that is always part of the journey. There are three wonderful stories that I think connect us in the mission of aged care. The first story is the personal story, the second story is the founder's story, and the third story, of course, is the Catholic story. So in the first story, the personal story, remember that Jesus walking along the road with the disciples, he asked them about their story. So a very important thing for us to do as we're working in aged care is to ask people their story. And sometimes they can tell us their story, and sometimes they can't, sadly. However, creating the space for telling the story creatively is really important, and finding ways where people who can't actually speak to us can tell their story, and enabling their families to do that as well. I often find that sometimes we don't involve the person because they can't speak to tell their story, but the more we can be in the presence of the person who's receiving our care is very important, I think. Just remembering that they can hear, even if they're not conscious, they can hear what's going on, and they're part of this ongoing journey and story. The second story is the founder's story. So in our organisations in Catholic aged care, we have many and varied founders with many different stories, and exciting stories that are about pioneering and doing things in very challenging times. So again, it's quite significant that as we build cultures in our organisation, that we have time to tell the story of the founders. It's a way of staff understanding how they connect to the organisation. It's a means of telling the story of the great courage and initiation of new and difficult things in a challenging world. And it's a way of really getting beneath the surface and understanding what was important to these founders and what continues to live on in our organisations today. And getting a real sense of that, a real sense of, well, how does that operate in our presence with older people? And then the third story is the Catholic story, and a wonderful tradition that we continue to carry on today. It's a living story, and our tradition today too is a dynamic story. We're in relationship. So how do we express that Catholicity in our organisations? How do we tell these stories like the Emmaus journey? What are the other gospel stories that we would tell in our organisations? And how do those stories connect with the founder's story and our personal stories and the stories of those we care for? And what images do we have in our organisation? What pieces of artwork? How do we celebrate rituals and liturgies in our organisations? Do we have Mass, and how often does that happen? How do we celebrate reconciliation and enabling those that we're walking with in aged care? How do we enable them to be resolved in the issues of their lives? And that's also connected with the telling of their stories. So this telling of the story, the Catholic story, is really what holds it all together. It's God's mission. God is really bringing us into this great story where we're all part of this journey together, the journey of healing. I'm often asked about what this Catholic story means. Do you have to be a Catholic to be part of it? Well, it's about being part of a greater story than us. It's about coming into this Catholic story and taking my part on the journey and committing myself to the beliefs of the Catholic Church. It's about moving to the edge where people really need me. It's about providing services to the poor and the marginalised, and it's about bringing forth those qualities of love and compassion as Jesus did on the road to Emmaus. It's about meeting people where they are, and it's about, as I've said before, the relationships being at the heart of who we are. So no, it's not about being Catholic, but it's about continuing to bring that Catholic tradition alive so that the people who are in our care really experience the light and the love of Jesus through us, because he's in us. That was what the disciples discovered after he'd disappeared. He was in them. Their hearts were burning. Aged care is also a very difficult ministry to be involved in. The amount of documentation and accountability and rules and regulations and standards, all of which are really very helpful in terms of making sure we focus on the client's needs. At the same time, it creates a very challenging environment for aged care. It's very difficult to prioritise our resources. There's no margin when it comes to our financial resources. So I want to say I acknowledge all those things. However, the relationships with our clients and with each other, all those people that I named before, they're the things that create the culture. So it's really because we believe that these relationships at the centre of our mission are so important that gives us the energy to do what needs to be done. It doesn't take away the challenges of all those things that I've just mentioned, but it enables us to really keep focused on those relationships and to remember that we too have moments in time where our hearts burn, where the relationships really enable us to continue doing what we're doing, and that's where the passion and energy comes from. So I think it's really important for the CEO and senior staff to model relationships of care and respect, because this is what sets the culture in an organisation. So it is really important that CEOs witness to these values that I'm talking about, the value of relationship. I was at an aged care place the other day and I was just delighted because I was sitting with a CEO who I needed to talk to, and residents and community care clients and staff were just really rejoicing in his presence around the coffee shop at the organisation I was at. And I just thought it was wonderful. I thought this is really that relationship being central to the organisation. And he then showed me around the organisation and he introduced me to different residents and staff. And they knew him and they were delighted to see him coming into their space. It was wonderful. So in summary, living the mission in aged care is really around those three themes. The theme of presence, journey, and telling the story. How about asking ourselves these questions? How am I present in this mission of aged care? How am I participating in this journey of aged care? And how am I telling the story in aged care? And secondly, how is my organisation with those three themes?